Hi everyone, it's Lindsay, and I am back today with a new kind of video. I want to do this with more stamp sets, but today I'm going to be doing 5 10-minute projects with just one stamp set and pretty limited supplies here. So today I'm going to be using this 2 Paper Divas stamp set, and it's called What's Cookin'. Now everything in the store is 50% off at this point, and this stamp set is still available right now when I'm making this video. So if you want it, I would go get it. Alright, so the first thing I did was I die cut this scalloped rectangle, and then I also die cut a stitched rectangle that was larger than this. I stamped down the cheese grater and also You're the Greatest sentiment right on that scalloped rectangle, and this I die cut from watercolor paper. I did that because for all of my coloring today, I'm going to be using my distress markers. This is the fastest way that I found to color in these images, and it's the look I like best for these particular images. So I put some of the pumice stone down on the actual grater itself. I went in with just a little bit of tumbled glass around it, and then right down on the very bottom I'll put just a little bit of a green color. I believe it's crushed olive. And then I'll just use a little bit of water to kind of pull that color out and just fade it into the white a little bit more. Now to speed up this process, I did use my heat gun for all of my drying today, so I'm just going to dry that very quickly. Now I put some fun foam on the back of the scallop die, and I will mount this right onto that black stitched rectangle, and then I'll mount that black stitched rectangle right onto an A2 white top folding card base. Now all of my projects today are very clean and simple. They are 10 minutes to make, and you can always put a few sequins on, you can add ribbon, whatever it is that you want to do to make it your own style. My style is clean and simple. I like to leave my cards clean and simple, and I like to make them quick. These are great for quick little things that you might need a card for. There is a look at the first finished project, and here's another picture as well. And you can see this is still a great card, but it only took about 8 minutes actually to make. So moving on to my next project, I have another stitched rectangle die up in the top there. This is from Craft Cardstock, and then I've just got a smaller white regular rectangle, and this is also from watercolor paper. On the bottom of that watercolor rectangle, I'm stamping You Are the Spice in My Life sentiment, and of course all of these stamps are from that stamp set that I'm using today. Now I'm using the spice jar from the stamp set, and I am stamping this repeatedly right across the center of what will become this tag. I'm also using watercolor ink here, a black plain dye ink that is waterproof. Now for the coloring, again, I'm using my distress markers, and I'm using a few different colors here. These are all what I would consider kind of more of a vintagey or country feel color, and that's the look I was going for with this tag. Now I'm just going to scribble on some color very quickly, and then I'm using my water brush just to bring out those colors and fan them out a little bit. Now for all of my cards, I also decided once I got through with the actual watercoloring, I wanted to add just a little bit something extra, and that was just shadowing these, and that really brought the whole scene to life instead of making it look so stale almost. So you can see here I'm just quickly using my water brush to bring those colors out and fan them out a little bit. And then I'm bringing in this navy color for my shadow underneath, and then my light blue just around those actual spice jars. And this again just kind of brings the scene to life. Again, I'll use my water brush just to fade those colors off a little bit so they're not so bright and vibrant and in your face. I do want to lighten them up just a little bit. And then I'll do the same thing with that tumbled glass I put around the spice jars. And again, because I am speeding through these, I'm going to use my heat gun to dry these. Now I just put some double-sided adhesive on the back of that white rectangle, and I'll adhere that right onto that craft scallop rectangle that is slightly larger. Now, because this is a tag, I did punch a hole right in the top center of this, and then I'm just going to thread some twine through. To thread my twine through, I just double it up and then stick the part that is hooked together through. That creates a loop, and then I can thread my 2 loose strands through, and it makes a nice little knot on the top that looks pretty. There's one final look at this tag, and I'm also going to bring in that first project. So we're down to 2. We just have 3 more projects to go. My next project is also a tag, and I've cut that same scallop die that I used on the first card, and then I also cut a stitched rectangle that was slightly smaller. Now I cut the scalloped from some mint green cardstock, and then again I used watercolor paper for my white cardstock. Now I folded these both in half, long ways, and then I'm going to use that same black ink to stamp my sentiment on the bottom of this white rectangle. The sentiment reads, "Cooking up a sweet wish for you," and you'll see why I use this sentiment when I show you the finished project later on in the video. So I also decided to use this little rolling pin to stamp right in the top center, right above that sentiment. Now on this particular project, you could use whatever image you wanted to from the stamp set. I just happen to really love rolling pins. I don't know why, but I just love them, so that's the image I used. I used a little bit of vintage photo distress marker, scribbled some in, and then I am really bringing that color out and lightening it up. I didn't want it so dark, and I really wanted a very light feeling for all of these. I also added a little bit of pumice stone right underneath for my shadow, and again, like I've been doing on all of my images, I put tumbled glass around the top of the image just to really give it a little bit more oomph and make it look like a true scene. Again, I'm bringing in my watercolor brush, and I am just really fading those colors out, and then I use my heat gun, to dry that out. Now I will be using my stapler on this, and that is going to give it a little bit more something too. So you'll see how I finish this project off in a little bit. Moving on to my fourth project. So I'm going to be using quite a few of the stamps. I'm first starting out with this bowl, and this reminds me of a bowl actually that my mother-in-law has, a crock bowl, if you know what I'm talking about. She's had it for years. She uses it for all of her baking, so I'm going to color it kind of identical to that. I'm also using the measuring cup. I'll also stamp down the little muffin, and then also the spice can. I have a craft A2 card base right at the top there ready to go, and I also die cut a scalloped frame by just using a scalloped rectangle and then a smaller rectangle right inside that. I did a little bit of die cut inlay, and then that made my hot pink frame that I have up at the top, and you'll see why it's hot pink in a moment. So I'm using just my distress markers again, and I will also use one distress ink because I wanted to use Festive Berries, and I don't have that in a distress marker as well. So I did use that, and that's why I have my palette out. So I'm using different distress markers just to color these in very quickly. And the quickest way I found to do my watercolor was to first put in all of my colors. So I am quickly scribbling in all of my little colors, and then I will come in and I will blend these out. So I'm not switching back and forth so much. So again, I'm using very country feeling colors, and I also used a little bit of yellow just to brighten up that muffin, just to give it a little bit more of a lemon feeling. So now I'm using Festive Berries, and I am really pulling this color out to make it look more like a hot pink. Now for the actual bowl, I'm using a little bit of antique linen, and I will also bring in just a very tiny bit of vintage photo just to give it a little bit of shading. And again, I'm really pulling that color out, really lightening it up by using quite a bit of water. Now for around the images, again, I will be using my tumbled glass marker just to give it more of a scene feel, and then right underneath I'll be using my pumice stone, as you can see here. Now I have to be honest, this card took a little bit longer than 10 minutes. It took me about 12 minutes 15 seconds, I think my timer was on my phone whenever I finished out. I timed all these cards. So I'm using my tumble glass now just to put a little bit of that around, a very thin line, and then I'll bring back in my water brush and really fade this color out. Now when I put this card together, you will see that easily this could be turned into a shaker card. It could easily be dressed up by adding a ribbon to it or even some sequins. You could also add some shimmer to this by using your Wink of Stella glitter brush pen to watercolor in these images. And these are all great ways to really brighten up and fancy up this card. But again, I already hit the 12-minute mark with this one, so I kept it nice and clean and simple. I added some fun foam to the back of this frame with double-sided adhesive, so you can see this would be very easy to turn into a shaker card. But I kept mine simple. I will just mount this right onto that craft card base that I have and right in the center of there. And then I can inlay this rectangle right inside there. It's the exact size. I used the same rectangle die to cut this out. I stamped my sentiment on the bottom, and this was done. That is 4 projects down. Here I'm going to give you one last look at the 4 projects. I've got my 2 tags and also 2 cards. There's one last look at that finished card. And then we'll move on to the last project. So for this one, I am doing a shape card. So I cut out a circle card base with a die cut, or with a die circle, excuse me. And I used black cardstock for that card base. Now for this smaller circle, I used a smaller circle die, of course, and then I cut that from watercolor paper again. I used all watercolor paper for my white cardstock except for card bases. Now I used that same circle die I used to cut the white circle out with. I used it to draw a line with my micron pen, and then I added a few little loops on the end to simulate kind of a hanging line. Now on that hanging line, I'm using this oven mitt, and I am just stamping these to look as if they are hanging off of that line. I stamped them 3 times, and now for my sentiment, I am using a piece of acetate. This is the front of the stamp set actually, the acetate that kind of protects it, and I am laying that right over that circle. I went ahead and used my sentiment and kind of rounded it to fit the shape of the circle. Then I can just put my acrylic block over that, pick it up in the shape of the circle, and then I'm inking it up and stamping it down, and it just hugs that circle so well. Now the reason I laid that plastic over it is 1, to protect my card, but 2, it gives it something to kind of stick onto so you're not fussing with it so much, and you get frustrated if I'm trying to shape it around the actual card base and I don't have anything for it to stick onto. Now for this particular card, I wanted some really intense, vibrant, almost retro colors, so I pulled out my Distress Mini ink pads. I'm just using 3 of them here. Crushed olive, festive berries, which I did use before, and then some peacock feathers. I think that the actual mini ink pads give you a more vibrant color, and that's why I pulled them out. And then I am just picking this up with my water brush, putting it on to a wet cardstock, use my heat gun to dry. I put some double-sided adhesive on the back of that circle and mounted it onto the card base, and that finishes off the last card. There's a final look at it, and then one last time I want to go through all of these cards. So of course I have this last one that I finished up that's my shape card, but I also have this other larger card that's a birthday card, and then I've got my little You're the Greatest card that could be used for any number of occasions. I also ended up with 2 tags out of this, and make sure to stick around in the pictures to see how I use that one I'm hanging on to below. It looks a little funny, but I promise you it's so cute on the finished project. So that finishes off the video for today. I hope to do this again with another stamp set. It was a lot of fun, and it was a nice challenge for me. As always, I will leave you guys with a few pictures of all the finished projects. For more information and the supply list, you can head to my blog, craftingwhilecaffeinated.wordpress.com. The link is in the description box below. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting.